So, Blue Jay fans, why is everybody suddenly on Buck Martinez's case? You can see my view from the On Fek Circle tonight, live on the Jays from the Couch YouTube channel. On a different night, Wednesdays, usually we're on Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, we are always presented by JFtC.com. And we are a proud member of the family of shows on the Jays from the Couch YouTube channel. Coming up tomorrow at her normal time, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, it's Karen Suter in Sunny Side of the Dome. She's still basking in the glow of not only getting to go to Blue Jay games over the last homestand, the first one back in Rogers Center. Blue Jays playing pretty well, so I'd imagine that Karen's going to be smiling throughout her 30-minute show. But of course, none of this would be happening without the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, and that's hosted by our senior editor and founder, Sean Doyle. Karen and I are lucky enough to be regulars, really, on the podcast, but we've also had Jordan Romano. We've had Keegan Matheson several times, Shai Davidi. We bring in people from other podcasts and other sites covering other teams to kind of get their point of view and see what's going on. So make sure you tune into that Mondays, 6 p.m. Eastern time. If you don't catch the podcast live anywhere that podcast can be found, you will find the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. Happy Wednesday. Wacky Wednesday or Weird Wednesday or however you want to put it. I am the Feckless Wonder, Steve Fek. Thanks for tuning in. We usually are on Tuesdays. We pushed it back because the start time of the podcast would conflict with the start time of the Toronto Blue Jays broadcast. And Lord knows, millions of people are going to tune in to the On Fek Circle as opposed to watching the Blue Jays game, right? No, but still, we try to do the right thing. Again, we are fans of the Toronto Blue Jays. And I did want to point out that at the top of the intro, I did engage Toronto Blue Jay fans because someone actually asked me on the social media why, Sean on the podcast and why Karen with Sunny Side of the Dome always says, "Good evening, Blue Jay fans." And I never do. It's not that I don't embrace Blue Jay fans. It's just that I'm working on the assumption that it's Blue Jay fans that are tuning in to this show. So I'm not trying to insult Toronto Blue Jay fans as a whole. I just tend to not use that as an opening. But I'll make it a point of welcoming Blue Jay fans because really, if you're not a Blue Jay fan, why are you putting up with me week to week? You have to be a really hardcore baseball fan to listen to my psychobabble every Tuesday. So, again, thank you, Toronto Blue Jay fans, for always tuning in. Even if you're not watching live, you can always catch the archives on the YouTube channel and our Facebook page. I want to, before I get into the heart of the show, I need to kind of clean up some old business from last week. Dr. Robert Herbert had put up a question asking who the greatest Toronto Blue Jay born in New Jersey was. Again, Dr. Bob is from New Jersey, as am I. I'm sticking by my answer of Mark DeRosa. There are a lot of baseball players that were born in New Jersey. Not many played for the Blue Jays. And those that did, I'm not sure we really want to remember them. A distant second would probably be Rick Cerrone, but I don't think anybody really thinks of Rick Cerrone as a Blue Jay. Think of him more as a Yankee. But so Mark DeRosa, though his time in Toronto was short, he always references it, on MLB Central, the show that he co-hosts during the week on MLB Network. And he's probably the best Jersey-born Toronto Blue Jay. And last week, you might remember I had clown written across my forehead as part of my public apology for Ross Atkins for not only calling him a rodeo clown and his actions as GM so far, but the fact that I refused to admit that he was going to make an impact deal, even though he almost had to. But yeah, he made some really great moves leading into the deadline, going down the stretch, trying to position the Blue Jays there. So I did do that. But there's another public apology I need to give, and that's to optimistic Blue Jays fan. His handle on Twitter is at callmechris316. We often go back and forth about different topics, on Twitter. Going up to the deadline, I had pretty much made fun of some of his ideas about what was going to happen in the trade deadline. And I was talking about how Marcus Semien could be a viable trade candidate if things weren't going quite the way we had hoped going into the deadline. And I'd even mentioned that Kevin Biggio might be the first of the core that might get traded. So that was two things that didn't come true. And I was going to hold him accountable if that did actually come true, but it did not. So Chris, I apologize. I refuse to write your name across my forehead, but I do appreciate the back and forth on social media. And speaking of back and forth, if you're out there watching live, whether you're on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, or even if you're catching the feed on Twitter, send us your questions, your comments. We're going to talk about Buck Martinez. And thanks to Buck Owens and the Buckaroos for the opening music interlude leading into the beginning of the program. But I want to talk about a couple just real quick feckless wonders. And given that the Blue Jays are now off their triumphant homestand, their first in Toronto in almost 2 full baseball seasons, they're won 11 out of their last 14, things going well. I wonder, what is a successful road trip for the Blue Jays going forward? Now, they are going to have a preponderance of games at home as opposed to being on the road. But I wonder, at this point, given that they are where they are in the wild card standing still, because unfortunately the Yankees and the A's pretty much kept pace with what the Blue Jays were doing at home. So is it just breaking even? So if you're playing 10 games on the road, you go 5-5. I think in a normal season, in a normal situation, I would say that's probably the case. I would say that that's really how you want to go. I'm not 100% certain that that's going to get it done, given the fact that they have to make up so much ground. Do you have to just have a winning record? So if you're 6-4, is it a successful road trip? And I'll go along with that. I mean, I will go along that a 6-4 would have to be considered a successful road trip for the Blue Jays. But really, from this point going forward, it's going to be winning every series on the road and at home. I think that might be asking too much. And realistically, is that really going to happen? No, it's not. But that really, to allow them to catch up and make up the ground, I would say that would be the successful road trip. Winning every series, including home series going forward, at least until, again, if other teams, if Boston keeps sliding, if the Yankees implode, which I still think they're going to do. I know they're ahead of the Blue Jays. I still think they've got the fork in their back. I think they're done. I don't think that they have the staying power to stay in the race. But, the Blue Jays kind of control their own destiny to a degree. So I would think that they would need to win every series, or at least come out ahead on the road trip at 6-4, or if there's 8 games, 5-3. They have to come out on the positive end of a record as opposed to just kind of treading water and breaking even from this point forward, for them to really be able to make up ground and insert themselves into the playoff race seriously. I still have my doubts. I don't know why. It was such an amazing atmosphere. And I wasn't there, obviously, at the Rogers Center. But it was such an amazing atmosphere to experience over TV, or even like I listened to quite a few of the games using MLB audio. You could sense it even from that standpoint. You could sense that it was just something special for them to finally be back home where they belong. Despite my Buffalo Bison's cap, and much as I love the fact that they played parts of 2 seasons here in the States, because there aren't many American Blue Jay fans that I've come across. It was great to have that happen. They're the Toronto Blue Jays, not the Buffalo Blue Jays or Dunedin Blue Jays, or if had they played in Pittsburgh, they weren't going to be the Pittsburgh Blue Jays. They're the Toronto Blue Jays. Just like the Toronto Raptors were not the Orlando Raptors. They're the Toronto Raptors. So we'll see what happens going forward. Something just tells me I'm not quite there. If they do exceedingly well in each of the series here on this road trip, and they're in Anaheim, then they go to Seattle. I'm not sure they're going to be the usual influx of Canadian fans coming down to Seattle to root on the Blue Jays. So it's more going to be more of a true road trip. But if they can come out ahead of this particular road trip and they win every series, then I would say I'm going to have to start singing a different tune. Now, the other thing I'm wondering about, another feckless wonder, and let me say this is strictly observational. There's no basis in fact. I'm not citing unsupported sources or whatever it is. It's just observing and watching the games. Have Jordan Romano and Adam Simber had conversations or talked about consistent deliveries? Like in the case of Simber being a side armor, bordering submariner, he has to have a consistent release point every single pitch, or he's going to be wild as hell. And Simber does kind of start in a rather lower kind of crouch, not quite a Craig Kimbrell kind of crouch where he looks like he's getting ready to wrestle, for a medal in the Olympics kind of a start. But he does start kind of low in the crouch. And then if you watch him, almost every outing, even if he gets hit, every outing, his delivery and his release point seems perfect. To me, since Simber has been here, I think Jordan Romano's delivery, and again, not just talking about when he does the knee bends or whatever it is, even now when he's pitching out of the stretch, where he doesn't quite have the exaggerated, dropping down, his delivery seems a lot more consistent. And again, it might be me. Okay, I have a cataract. I'm going to be 61 years old later this month. So some of my observations might not be as on target, but I tend to focus in on that as someone that has been a pitcher, not necessarily at the professional level, but at various levels, as someone who has specialized when he was coaching, working with pitchers. I look at that and I say, I wonder if those two guys somehow have had conversations in the bullpen about deliveries, whether Jordan sought Simber out, did Adam Simber just say, hey, you know what? I really enjoy the way you pitch, but I've noticed this. This does happen in bullpens and on pitching staffs. Pitchers talk to each other. Okay. And the pitcher will say, hey, if I'm speeding up my delivery, make sure you tell me. Or when I'm out of the stretch, if I'm, not tipping my pitch, but if I'm trying to rush things, I'm not going to have my command. So that those kinds of conversations go on. And I just wonder if Adam Simber has had a positive impact on Jordan Romano, because Jordan Romano has been terrific. Yes, he's had the occasional bad outing. Every relief pitcher is, but I'm just wondering about that. But my biggest wonder this week is, why is everybody dumping on Buck Martinez? So it's time for Blue Jays Way, where we talk about history. We talk about Blue Jays culture. We talk about what it means to be a Blue Jay fan. And to me, and the Blue Jays have had some amazing players play here. Dave Steve, George Bell, Jesse Barfield, Joe Carter, Robbie Alomar, Carlos Delgado. You can just go right down the list. Josh Donaldson. You go right on down the list. But really, at least for me, if I had to pick one player or one personality that represents the Toronto Blue Jays to baseball fans at large, it's Buck Martinez. He had a great early career, at least defensively. He was drafted by the Phillies, traded to the Astros. The Astros actually claimed him as a Rule 5 pick. Then the Astros then traded Buck Martinez to the expansion Kansas City Royals. He was there till 1977. He was a big part of the very good Milwaukee Brewer teams of the late 70s. He was DFA'd because he just couldn't hit. So in 1981, Buck Martinez became a Blue Jay. And he was there as the Blue Jays were emerging out of the dark ages of their expansion years. And there was a plan. They drafted well, they acquired young players, but those early years were kind of tough. And he even shut some of the critics up about his bat because for 2 straight years in 82 and 83, he hit double-digit home runs. He played until a horrific injury in 1985. But this also speaks, it's an iconic moment in Blue Jays history because they were playing the Mariners out in Seattle. Phil Bradley's on second base. Gorman Thomas, who's on the bottom, the tail off part of his career, finishing up in Seattle, singles to right. Bradley comes around. Jesse Barfield, who may have had the best outfield arm I have ever seen personally, and I have seen Roberto Clemente live and in person. That's how old I am. Just rifles a perfect throw to Buck Martinez. Just a collision at the plate. Buck breaks his left leg and completely dislocates his ankle. Let me tell you, having had multiple surgeries on my ankle and having had a complete dislocation, it's not fun. It's painful. Everybody talks about the Buster Posey rule and the collision that he experienced at home plate. If you can find the video on YouTube, I would put up that was a even more violent collision than what Buster Posey endured. And that inspired the new rules about running into the catcher. So Bradley's safe. Martinez is an obvious pain. But Gorman Thomas, the umpire, for whatever reason, didn't think it was important to stop the game despite Buck being obviously seriously injured. He decides to go around second, try to make it to third. Buck, on the ground, throws it to third base. Throws it wild. But still, just to have the peace of mind to be in that kind of pain and still try to gun the guy out at third base, that's the kind of ball player that Buck Martinez was. And then to make it even better, when the ball got past Garth Orge, George Bell picks it up, backing up the play, fires directly to Buck, who's still laying on his side sprawled, catches the ball and applies the tag and tags out Gorman Thomas at the plate. So this is the kind, the mindset, the kind of old school ball player that Buck Martinez is. He never really bounced back. He kind of came back in 86, but then he became a broadcaster. And he was a broadcaster for years. Really, since 1987, except for a little time frame after he was fired by the clueless wonder, not the feckless wonder, but the clueless wonder, J.P. Ricciardi. and he went and did games with the Orioles with Gary Thorne. He was a broadcaster here with Jim Houston. I forgot there was somebody else in there before Houston. But Stan Schulman started to come in part-time, splitting between ESPN and there. So he's been a broadcaster here since 1987. So really, it's 34 years ago he was starting to do games. And he was so well thought of that not only did the Orioles grab him up after he was fired as a manager, he's done games for ESPN and TBS. So for me, that's how I really came to appreciate Buck Martinez, because living where I did, it was really hard back in the day to get Blue Jay games on the radio, let alone on TV, because unless they were in the playoffs or the World Series, really, U.S. media is not going to put a Blue Jay game on. So he brought that old school mentality, yet he managed to, and hopefully Karen won't get mad at me about this, Buck Martinez might have been the original Sunny Side of the Domer. He wasn't afraid to criticize players that maybe weren't hustling. There was the infamous live mic issue when Marcus Stroman was here, when he basically incited a brawl with the White Sox, and he and Tim Anderson got into it. But he always found, even when he was criticizing, he found ways to always look at what positive contributions were being made on the field. And during those years, I mean, other than the World Series years, I'm taking those out. Okay, let's go from 89 when they were back in the playoffs, through 93. Those are some good times for the Blue Jays. It was pretty ugly after that. Right up until, 2014, 15, and 16. The two playoff years in 15 and 16. There were some very dark times. But Buck he made you feel good about being a Blue Jay fan, even when he was being critical, because he was being fair. I will concede to you that the Buck Martinez of 1987 or 1993, or when he came back in 2007 or 8, I guess he came back, that Buck Martinez, the one that you saw on ESPN and you saw on TBS, on nationally televised games, he's slipping a bit. He was not quite Yogi Berra, but he was prone to malapropisms. And now I think there's a lot of things that are kind of piling on where Blue Jay fans, new generation of Blue Jay fans, not old geezers like me, the newer, younger fans that tend to propagate social media outlets, they can't stand them because of, and again, you should know the names of the players that are playing. You shouldn't misidentify a player. Okay. I mean, everybody, makes mistakes. I've been in broadcasting since I was 16 years old. So from 1976 up until this little misadventure, Lord knows I've made mistakes. But Buck is a part of Blue Jays culture. It started as a player. It continued into the glory years of the Blue Jays franchise as an announcer. People forget that when he was a manager here, and let me actually pull this up, he was a good influence on the younger players as far as instilling confidence. Roy Halladay, and his story is, legendary in baseball. That's why he's a Hall of Famer, not just with the Blue Jays. But really, it was in 2001 was the first time, even though I believe he spent some time at AAA, it was the first time that he really found his groove and found himself. And who was the manager? It was Buck Martinez. The Blue Jays actually, in 2001, in a season where they finished 80 and 82, they were in first place as late as May 7th. They spent 24 days in first place. Nobody expected that. And why did nobody expect that? Because the Blue Jays finished dead last in team batting and team pitching. Now, they had a bad stretch leading into the All-Star break, but even after the All-Star break, they were above 500. They were 38 and 36. So going into 2002, you kind of felt good. I mean, yes, they were 80 and 82, but you kind of felt good. And for me, I felt good because Buck Martinez was their manager. Of course, now this was at the beginning of the reign of terror that J.P. Ricciardi came to symbolize. He was looking for a reason to get rid of him because Gord Ash hired him. And generally, as a rule, anything that Gord Ash did, you wanted to just disavow yourself of. But they got off to a tough start. 20 and 32, they fired him. But during that time, I mean, I personally felt good about Buck being the Blue Jays manager. You know, and I know they brought in Carlos Tosca, and when you go wins and losses, yeah, Tosca did better than Buck. He was not nearly the game manager that Buck was. I think the talent, I've said this about Charlie Montoyo and the Blue Jays, the team is going to finish 4 or 5 games ahead of the manager. And I think that was the case with Tosca, just as it was now with Charlie Montoyo. So again, Buck, player, broadcaster, manager, left. There was some hard feelings, but he did come back. And if I remember right, Blue Jay fans were happy when he came back. Is he miscast now as a play-by-play guy when Dan Shulman is not there? Yes, he is. He's never been as good as a play-by-play guy as he's been as a color analyst. And if you're working for ESPN and you're working for TBS, as a rule on national broadcast, somebody's seeing something. And I love to listen to Buck break down a game. But he's not flashy now. You know, there are some announcers that work the StatCast and the FanGraph stuff and the analytics in great. I mean, the Astros broadcast team does a great job. The Mariners broadcast team does a great job. But there are other announcers where it's almost like it's a hostage. When Buck talks about analytics and StatCast stuff, it's almost like those hostage videos you see. Oh, imperialist pig dogs. I'm here to renounce the great Satan, and things are going to be better. I mean, that's almost what the reaction is to Buck. He's not what he used to be, and he's not a play-by-play guy. But Buck Martinez, more than any other player, has the standing power and is a symbol, an iconic symbol of the Toronto Blue Jays. So how about focusing on all the good he has done? And let's not hammer him for the effects of age showing up. He's a Blue Jays icon. Just like with the Pirates, the gunner Bob Prince, at the end, it was really ugly. And I produced games where he did hockey, and it still hurts me. But let's get off Buck's case. He is an icon, and he should be able to be part of Blue Jays broadcast from this time forward. If you disagree, please leave your comments after the fact. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the On Fek Circle. We'll be back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget, coming up this Thursday, Sunny Side of the Dome, Karen Suter on the YouTube channel, on our Facebook page. And of course, every Monday, it is the Jason the Couch radio podcast. I'm the Feckless Wonder, Steve Fek. We'll talk at you next week.